Hello, everyone. Let's go ahead and get this candidates forum started. Please take your seats. Hi, everyone. I'm Janet Judd. I'm going to be the moderator today, and I'm also your immediate past president. Okay. All right, I'd like to call Bob Bax, Jerry Moore, Antoine Rhodes, and Todd Thomas up here for the NAR Directors Candidate Forum. While they're coming on stage, I'll go ahead and start reading the rules. I already did my welcome. We've got a 90-second opening statement by each candidate. All the questions are predetermined, and each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer them. The ground rules that they'll have the 60 seconds to answer, but if they do not use all of their allotted time for a response, that time cannot be applied to another question. Candidates may use all of their allotted time for a more detailed answer. They may use some of their allotted time for an answer. They can briefly indicate agreement or disagreement with another candidate, or they can choose not to answer. Closing statements from a candidate, they'll have 90 seconds. And it says we encourage spontaneous comments or summaries related to what's been said during the debates. So let's go ahead and get started. The first question is, and I will start with Bob Bax. I keep turning to look at you guys. Opening statement. That's right. Thank you. Opening statement. Bob Bax.
Thank you, Janet. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Bob Bax. I have been a realtor for over 30 years. I've been an agent, I've been a manager, I've been a broker and a co-owner. Over the years, I've done a lot of things, and just to give you an idea, I still am embedded in one of our 7 offices. As a co-owner, we at Berkshire Hathaway Alliance with 7 branch offices, 1 corporate office, we have a title company as well, 450 agents, 55 staff. But I still am embedded in one of our offices, so just to give you an idea, in the last few weeks, I've been on listing calls. On Monday, I helped a listing agent navigate 24 offers and these crazy appraisal gap challenges. I've met with agents who are looking to start a team, grow a team, dissolve a team, and then because it's the new year, I've met with a few agents who have decided to maybe sunset their career and wanting to know how to do that. Let's see. I don't know how much time I have left. Stop.
And if they don't stop, you're going to hear me go, eh. No. Jerry, you're up.
Hi, everyone. I'm Jerry Moore. I am from Branson, Missouri, and a member of the Tri-Lakes Board of Realtors. And thank you all for coming out to listen to us today. First off, I just want to say I'm like you. I'm in the trenches every day with buyers and sellers. I have a team. And I'm just absolutely passionate about Missouri Realtors and what we stand for. And in doing so, I actually coach new agents and talk with them about the code of ethics, because I think that's something that's very important, and we'll talk about that here again in a minute. But I am also a real estate investor. I invest in commercial as well as residential flipping properties, and also with Airbnb. So I kind of have a diversity of things that I like to do, and it's the same. Same with my passion here is that there's just a lot of stuff that I like to be involved in, and just being before you today, you can tell some of us have a little bit of nervousness because this is the first time that I've been up in front of a group of my peers like this. And so I just want to share with you that as a realtor, I put that first and foremost, and sometimes my family says I put it definitely before them. And it's just who I am. I've done this for 15 years. I am a real estate broker in Missouri and in Arkansas. And so I have two sets of rules that I have to follow. And just being a part of this organization, everything about it makes me want to do more.
Thank you. Antoine.
Thank you, Ms. Judd. Antoine Rhodes, Pulaski County Board of Realtors. That's located down by Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. Been doing real estate 8.5 years. I am a 20-year retired military veteran. Serving the people is what I do. Being a part of your realtor family is a part of my life. I humbly come before you, giving you a piece of me. I'm here to do service for Missouri Realtors.
Thank you, Antoine. Todd?
Madam President, my name's Todd. I'm out of Springfield. I'm running for NAR director, just like we all are. Started in doing real estate. Well, I first got my license in 1994, and I was just 22 years old, and I looked like I was about 14. So I kind of let that drop off. I was Bob down at Long and Hagee down in Tri-Lakes is where I had my license. Went and did a lot of other things, got into construction, I'm a journeyman electrician. I started doing property management, and I opened up our own shop in 2005. Isabel and I, we have our own brokerage. I've had my broker's license now since 2005. I've been coming to all the state meetings. I don't think I've missed a state meeting since 2007. I love real estate. I love what we are. There was a quote that I heard here recently. I am because we are. And it just really hit me, besides it having the R at the end of it, but it was A-R-E. It's really the community and the people that I'm around that have made me who I am. And it's because of that we have to give back. We all give back. That's why we're here. And I just want to give back more. And that's why I'm here for this position.
Thank you, Todd. Now, I do want to point out that we've got 4 candidates up here, but tomorrow the Board of Directors will be voting, you will be voting for 2. So I just wanted to make sure you all know that. All right, so let's start with the first question. And I think I'm going to start with Todd.
Okay.
And we'll work our way this way. Our state association has really embraced emerging issues over the past few years with a new forum subject at each business conference. What one issue do you think NAR should be more focused on that impacts the greatest number of members from your point of view as a national director?
Okay. So I got really fast on this. Right now, the NAR seems like its main focus is diversity and equity. As realtors, we should embrace this. This is the core of our being. And it's great that this is up front. But I really, truly believe that the largest emerging issue is housing stock. We really, as an organization, need to come together with groups like Home Builders Association, trades associations, anything we can to expedite getting people in the field that are trained to build the houses. If we do not have structures, we don't have a product, we won't be able to sell anything. To me, that is the largest emerging issue. Getting housing stock up. It's been since 2008. We had a 10-year lapse in the amount just to keep up with what we need to keep people housed. We need to fill that gap in. We need to figure out what we can do as an organization to work with other people.
Thank you. Next, I'm going to go to Jerry Moore. You have 60 seconds.
So with NAR as a director, the most important role that they play is that they hold the National Association of Realtors accountable for everything that they do, just like your local and your state board. And to this week, and while I've been here, I've actually been talking with people about what they feel their emerging issues, what emerging issues are coming forward. And just looking out in this room at some of the faces that I've talked to, I heard so many different, every single person had a different opinion of what an emerging issue was. And from what I discovered from that is there's not a one issue as an NAR director that you would be facing. We come before you to represent all of the issues that you bring forward and to be your voice and your advocate for what's important to you to push forward at the national level, to have national association then move forward on so that we can move forward as Missouri together collectively. So we're your voice, we're your seat at the table.
Thank you. Antoine.
In my honest opinion, I believe diversity and inclusion is one of the emerging issues that we need to get to the forefront of the room. We already have a visual of it, and we already have taken a position on it, and we tell everyone that we want you to feel comfortable. We want you to voice your opinion and get involved. But if we get more guidance from NAR and actually put it in the room, the elephant will squeeze out the room through the crack. Then we can all be normal and be able to talk about challenging things that we still are uncomfortable with talking about today.
Thank you. And Bob?
Thank you, Jan. I actually agree with Todd and Antoine on the inclusion, and I think it was a great start with 10.5 last year, but I think we need to help NAR get that message out, and there's a lot of challenges with what a rational person would think, and we all need to be on the same page with how we review and accept 10.5 and how we enforce it.
Thank you. Jerry, I think everyone's answered the question. Have I had everyone answer the question? All right. Jerry, you have served as a state director before. How would serving as an NAR director be different, or would it?
So I believe it is similar, it's just at a higher level. So as serving as a state director, which I've been privileged to do, I'm there as your voice, again, your seat at the table to answer for you to a higher calling. And so at the national level, it would be the same thing, whether it's fair housing, whether it's diversity, whether it's membership dues, whether it's policies and bylaws changes, all of those things just from local level, state level to national level. It's just at a higher level doing the same thing. And I feel that I have the experience now to do that, where in the past I probably didn't. So I ask that you thoughtfully consider when I say that there's more than one emerging issue on the table. There are, and we've talked about several of them here in the room.
Bob? Happy to. You have served as a state director before. How would NAR, how would this term be different, or would it?
Well, it is at a higher level, as Jerry said. But I think it's all of our, we want to work hard. We've worked hard in our local levels and our state levels, and we all bring the skill to take it to the national level. I'm fortunate enough to have a network across the country with our Better Homes, Berkshire Hathaway Alliance. And just being involved in the past, I was lucky enough to be a NAR director when I was the president and president-elect for St. Louis. So I think it's business as usual, but at the higher level, and just make sure our voice is heard. And I think it's really important, especially on advocacy, because unfortunately we have a hyper polarization right now with our leaders and the government, and we need to remind them about home ownership and property rights. They've got all this other stuff they've been fighting over. And I think we need to remind them why we're coming to their offices and talking to them.
Antoine.
It would be a little different. Being a NAR director is on the same lines of being a state director. But when I was a state director, it was easier for me to gather information from the state conferences and take it back to my local board because I knew most of them. My challenge this time is uphill because I don't know a lot of people at NAR. But it's a doable task that I'm willing to endure by meeting the people in the room, asking the right questions to get answered and bring it back to the state of Missouri.
Thank you. And Todd Thomas?
So my position is, it's no different. My job as a director is to listen to our members, to bring those issues to the state meetings, to make sure that every voice is heard, to listen to the comments in the room, make an informed decision, to vote on those decisions that benefits our membership, to take those whatever information that I gain from the state conferences, bring it back, let people know about it. So no, it's no different. There is a difference. They're far away. You got to fly. You got to spend a bunch of money for a hotel. Other than that, no, I don't think there's any difference being a state director. Dedication, doing your job, doing it right.
We know that each one of you are qualified, dedicated, and willing to serve this association. What was the internal factor, the driving force, the passion, the it factor that caused you to submit your application to be an NAR director representing Missouri? I am going with Antoine first. Surprised you, didn't I, Jerry? Yeah.
The it factor. Receiving the message, knowing that I was ready to lead. Being a leader is someone that can give a sense of purpose, direction, and motivation. Leaders are voted upon and given the opportunity based off potential. Because before knowing nothing but their name or something that they have done, you can only give them the next opportunity based off the potential that you see in them. The it factor is me.
Thank you. Bob.
I was ready to come back because, and I say come back because I served many years in St. Louis, and the last couple years was the president and then retired president. And I took a year off, and I was ready to come back again. I wanted to contribute. And I came off of a MR exec as well, and and then now with transition of our company, I have more time, and I want to continue to give back as I've been doing for the years.
Okay, thank you. Todd?
I believe in a life of service. That's what we're here for. There's a quote from the Eagles Lodge that when I was a member of the area that I just loved. It was, although the world may scoff and jest, a life of service is the best, and happiness will always be to those who serve humanity. And it's just great. Serving makes me happy. I don't consider this a leadership role. NAR director is a servant role. I'm here wanting to serve our members, to bring our concerns, to make sure our voice is heard at the table, to make sure that the best things are done for our Realtor family.
Thank you. Jerry?
So for me, the pivotal point for me to decide to run for NAR director was actually at an NAR convention. I started going a few years ago to the national conventions, and if you've never been, I recommend that you go. But it had to do with when you go through your different committees and you watch and you listen in the hallway talk and you hear all the different opinions of your peers, and then going into the board of director meeting and watching the voting process at the national level, sometimes it didn't convey from what the state wanted to what the actual person said or didn't say when they got to that pivotal point where there was going to be a vote. And it's not about me, it's not about us as a national director, it's about you and us being unified in the decision that goes forward. And so for me, I want to be that difference that takes that vote to the table as a unified decision.
Thank you. All right, our last question. There are many methods and forms of communication or exchange of ideas. Realtors love to hall talk. Some people will come to you directly and others won't. How will you tap into and find out the issues being discussed in hall talk? Todd, you have 60 seconds.
Okay, really fast one, I guess, again. So I've had the honor of serving on 2 NAR committees. I've been on the Diversity Committee and the Fair Housing Policy Committee. So I've been to quite a few NAR conferences. It is busy. You are not going to catch a lot of hall talk in the meetings. I mean, in the hall, because everybody's running everywhere. The meetings are really spread out. You will hear a little bit of hall talk when you're sitting down, you're getting ready for your meetings. But the biggest place I found is for hall talk for NAR is thanks to Missouri Realtors. The Landing has been replicated as the hub. And so right now, one of the big ones is, should we let affiliates sit on boards? It's kind of neat to look at the 3 different views, but they're like 90 different threads long. But it's just, there's our hall talk now that I've found. And that's where you gain a lot of insight for NARs through the hub right now.
Thank you. Bob.
Well, I love walking through the halls and seeing people, either I know or I don't know, and introduce myself to them and talking to them and finding out what's important to them, what's going on, in, not only in their business, but their family, their health. And there's, in my opinion, there's a couple versions of hall talk. There's the one hall talk where the person was maybe in the meeting and heard something and wants to give me feedback, which is wonderful. And then the other hall talk has been passed down 2 or 3 times, and maybe it's not as accurate. And it's our job in those halls to make sure that what was discussed and maybe voted on is explained appropriately and rationalized and justified.
Antoine, please.
I think hall talk starts at the end of the day. After that last coffee, that last cup of water, after you've conveyed all meetings, and you meet someone at a different beverage station, and you ask them what committee that they went to, and you start it that way. But it takes an attentive ear to receive the sound and learn a lesson from that individual. And if it truly means something to you, you're going to remember it and not have to write it down. And that's one way to get some of the small talk. And the second would be at a later station at night, listening to your favorite genre of sound, and you can get more small talk. And then that would carry you through the evening to the next day.
Jerry.
So I may or may not have been in those same hall talks. No, seriously, that's where the magic happens, in my opinion, is the hall talk conversations. Because some people are intimidated to have a microphone in their hand. Some people are intimidated to sit at the table. And in the hall talk, that's where people can just be real. And it's about those real conversations where the magic comes forward of, hey, what about this? What about that? What if we did this? What if we did that? And that's where those ideas come back to your directors and to your committee members to make those decisions and add things on or change things, and it's all about you all bringing those conversations. And I absolutely love Hall Talk, just so you know. And I just believe that that's where our advocacy happens. That's where, risk management talks come about. And we discuss things just in general, like, hey, if you were in this situation, what would you have done, or what would you do differently?
Thank you. Now it's time for our 90-second closing comments. Going to go from this direction. So Bob, will you go first, please? 90 seconds.
Well, I'm asking for your vote. I have the time, I have the energy, I want to help improve our association, our National Association of Realtors. I've got interest as far as what's going on with the MMPA situation, and getting maybe some help from National on that. It's just been my life for 30 years, and I don't see it slowing down or stopping soon, and I want to continue. At St. Louis Realtors, I was the president, and a couple of my missions there was to be an all-realtor board that we passed. We also, I also wanted to do something about health insurance, real health insurance for our members, and we didn't get it done by the end of my year, but the following year we pushed it through, and we have a real program for our agents, and it's a wonderful value package for our members. And it was just, it's just an honor to serve on local, state, and hopefully national level with your help and your vote tomorrow. Thank you.
Jerry?
So I too would like to ask for your vote. I believe that the experience that I've had on the local level, being president of our local board, and from the committees that I've served on at the state level, and also serving as your National Association of Realtors Missouri C2EX ambassador, I believe in the code of ethics, and I believe in our professionalism, and that it starts with us doing those things correctly and moving forward correctly. And I believe with the National Association of Realtors, there are so many member benefits that we do not take advantage of because so many people don't know about them. And I believe that I believe that we have to communicate, we have to educate, we have to advocate, and we have to articulate our position of who we are as Missouri Realtors, because we're looked at from around the United States as a driving force for many things that are accomplished at the National Association of Realtors. You've seen that in the leadership that has gone on before. And as your National Association of Realtor director, I would be your voice to help move those things forward with our association. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Antoine?
I too ask for your vote. We know there can only be two. So the choice is yours, and it's a difficult one at that, because all four of us are qualified. I would love to be one of those two that you choose to represent you alongside with the other NAR directors, so I can embed myself with them and move forward for you. I'm trainable, I'm humble, and I'm me. Please give me one of your two votes.
Thank you. Todd?
Well, there's a recurring theme here. I'm also asking for your vote. I believe my training and appointment to the Springfield Mayor's Commission on Human Rights and Community Relations, where I took fair housing complaints for the city of Springfield for 7 years. I chaired that committee for 2 years. Being on the NAR Diversity and Fair Housing Committee, doing implicit bias, serving on grievance and professional standards, and I'm an ombudsman. I've been to the NAR mediation training in Chicago. I have that training. I I know about the fair housing. It is my wheelhouse. Being a property manager, I understand and appreciate the intricacies of property owners' rights and the right of people to live in clean and safe housing, and how important that is, and what our profession means economically throughout the United States. I am prepared for this job, and it is a job, and it's a job that I'd be honored to represent Missouri and to represent our membership. So thank you for your vote.
All right, closing statements. Oh, that was your closing statements. I'm awake.
Do it again.
All right, guys, let's give them a round of applause. I was just following my papers. It was like, where's Kara? Do I need to read the rules again, or can we just go forward? Okay. All right, let's go ahead and call the treasurer-elect candidates forward. All right, if you don't mind, I read the rules earlier, and you guys heard the rules. Do you agree to what we said?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you.
I can't sit down. Yeah,
Okay.
please sit down. I just,
All right, let's go ahead. Bobby, you're first with the 90-second opening statement.
Hi, friends. I am Bobby Howe. I am a second-generation realtor from St. Joe. Some of you know this story, some of you don't, so if you do know it, just play along with me. My mom got into real estate when I was 8 years old. She was a single parent. I was an only child, so I was a part of everything, every listing, every showing, all of it. And when I was 10 years old, I started writing her contracts because I was a smart aleck. I know that is really hard for you to believe, but she would misspell the word refrigerator, or she would put a closing on Sunday and I would correct her. So one day she goes, "If you're so smart, you write the contract." Well, I wrote a perfect contract. So growing up, that's how I made my allowance. I wrote my mom's contracts, I did her marketing, I said I was never gonna be in real estate, and I was licensed on my 18th birthday. Yes, some of you know what that's like. I've tried to escape the industry several times because I was burnt out. You see, my mom was that typical top producer who was way too busy for the association world. But what I discovered was, y'all are my family. This is what keeps me going. This is what keeps me in real estate. And I started attending state meetings. It was either the spring or the fall of 2006. It was over in St. Charles. I remember walking into that room, and my life was forever changed by many of the leaders that are in this room today. I want to serve Missouri realtors so I can raise that next generation of leaders just like myself.
Thank you.
it's hard for me to sit down because I heard a quote from a Swanepoel Trends report. I don't know if you read this one that said that one of the greatest threats to our industry is uninformed leaders making decisions. And when I get up here and try to sit down and then I look out and see all of you, I'm thinking, I don't know if that's true anymore, because look at all these leaders who are here to be informed, not necessarily to support their friend on stage. They're here to make sure that they're going to be an informed leader, making an informed decision, so that we have a strong association for years and years to come, for the rest of our lives at least, and for many decades to come. And that's why I get here and I see people excited to learn and listen for the ideas that matter, for the stories that are being told. And you're here because, you, like me, you believe in progress and you're ready to say, let's take the next step and let's build our future. And that's why I'm here, because I'm excited to work with you at building our future on the ideas and the stories and the things that we need to do to make sure that we realtors are always the center of the transaction.
I'm really glad you stepped back, because I was afraid you were going to step off. So thank you, Michael. All right, I've got the questions. As a state association, I think we all agree that we have really embraced emerging issues over the past few years. Is there a trend or issue on the horizon that you think our members and conference attendees need to hear much more about? Bobby.
Yes, actually, I do. My topic that I think we do not talk nearly enough about in real estate is mental health and mental wellness. There was a recent study that came out that said 68% of real estate professionals deal with mental illness at some level. That's not just talking about the daily stresses that we feel. You see, I said I was a second-generation realtor. The part I didn't tell was that almost 9 years ago today, my mom took her life. My life was forever changed in that moment, and yet now I have a duty and an obligation to go out and share her story and to talk about mental health and mental wellness. And the more that I talk about it, the more feedback that I get from people like you, I realize we're not talking about it enough. We're taught to go, 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 sell, 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 but we don't talk about how to deal with the stress that this industry puts on us. And I feel like it's an emerging issue that we need to be talking a lot more about.
Thank you. Michael?
Well, there's about 3 little letters I can think of that is an emerging issue, but it's not going away, and those letters are DOJ. And they've kind of gone away for right now, but they're not. They're regrouping. They're one of those disruptors. They're a major reason why we're having, at the MLS administrators meeting earlier this week, we talked about all the changes that we just passed in November. But folks, again, there are so many disruptors, our own DOJ, coming against us to try and tear us apart and take us out of the center of the transaction. And we've got to be working together, binding together, linking arms, and being more intentional, more purposeful every chance we get to make sure that the realtor is always at the center of the transaction, and that we fight these disruptors and, unfortunately, our own DOJ if we have to, because that's how important we are. Home ownership is that important that we'll take on the DOJ if we have to. That's the American dream. That's who we are. So,
All right, the next question will be to Bobby. Please give us a specific example when you, while serving in a leadership role, perhaps locally or nationally, where events required you to step in and guide the group in a different direction or do a pivot.
I feel like I have a million examples that I could give of this, but I will go with my most recent example, Kip. I was president of KCRAR in 2020. We all know what happened March 13th when the world shut down. As president, I had a huge agenda of things that I wanted to accomplish, and in the blink of an eye, everything changed in that moment, and we had to pivot. We were having conference calls until midnight. They were starting again at 6 a.m. We were texting constantly because we wanted to make sure that our members were deemed essential. And we weren't just Kansas City. We had a lot of little outlying areas, and we had to work in each one of those communities, and we successfully did that. And we didn't get anywhere where we thought we were going to go that year, and yet I believe it would be a very successful year that we had.
Thank you. Michael?
one of the things I'm the most proud of and excited to see happen at the local level. It was late 2017. We just finished writing a new strategic plan for our association. And the president at the time, Antonio Serrano, one of the best leaders Springfield's ever put out. And the president right after, I was the president after him, right after me was Angie Mullings. The three of us were sitting down looking at that strategic plan. And one of the items on there said, Leadership Academy. And that's when I knew, you know what, we're the third largest board in the state. We don't have our local leadership academy. And we wonder why we don't have as much committee involvement, and we don't have as many people wanting to be on the board, and we're struggling to fill these positions. And we've all three graduated from the State Leadership Academy. We've got to do a better job. And so the three of us really sat down and worked real hard to get our first class announced that year. And in fact, next week, the three of us who are still involved with our local leadership academy, next week we'll have retreat number 1 for class number 5. And to me, it's completely revolutionized and changed the power of leaders in our local area. And a big thank you to those two and for what we got accomplished there.
All right. My next question will be to you. Okay. All right. It's a two-part question. Everyone has to face hard, critical decision-making circumstances. What's the hardest decision you've had to make this past year, and why exactly was it so difficult for you?
Probably in the last 12 months is when there's a doctor involved and there's a decision to be made about an end of life for someone that you love and care about a lot, and you don't want to see it go, and it's too early, and that's a hard decision. And I don't know about any of you if you've had to face that in the last 12 months or 12 years. It could have been in the last 20 years. That's a hard decision. And it really kind of helps put things back in perspective about what's important in life. And as a leader, we've got to make hard decisions from time to time. Maybe not that kind of hard decision. But friends, we've got to make sure that we're always getting as much information from every corner of the state, from all the people involved and all the shareholders, all of our members. To me, every member is important. And I want as much diversity and equity and inclusion and involvement when we're making heavy decisions about our next CEO, about our next building we're going to rent or buy or build or whatever it may be.
You're going to make me go, eh.
I'm sorry?
I said stop.
Oh, it's stop. I'm sorry. I was talking about hard
I
decisions.
told you I would go, eh.
That was a hard decision. That was easy.
Thank you. Bobby?
I don't know how you follow that answer because that is one of the toughest decisions you will ever make in life. I really thought hard and long about this question because I had a couple of ideas that came to mind. But quite frankly, for me, one of the toughest decisions I've made in the last year, and it seems super silly, but it was the decision to get a dog, specifically a puppy. Because wow, they're a lot of work, I'm gone a lot, and I have a family that I love them dearly, but they're not as helpful as we would maybe sometimes like for them to be. And so for me, deciding to get a puppy and going full in with him has been an amazing, awesome experience. We also love to send him away to the kennel for a few days. But it really was a tough decision for our family, and we really worked through it together, and we've come out the other side, and I think we're a stronger family unit than we've ever been because of it.
Thank you. Michael? You are asking to represent the membership of this association. Realtors come in all shapes and sizes and ages and demographic backgrounds. If I was a new realtor, what would you do for me specifically as a member of the leadership team?
You know, whether you've been a realtor for 30 minutes or 30 years, I'd like to believe I could look at your business card and tell the difference. But it's probably going to be the same picture that you did in your first 30 days that maybe you have in your last 30 years. So I understand that. But what I want to tell that person 30 days in or 30 years in is, you know what? Hey, I really am your friend. I'm here to listen to you and make sure I can do anything I can to put your ideas into motion and to make sure that you know you have someone on a leadership team who's approachable and who's ready to hear from you and get your ideas involved and in play. Someone from Women's Council just this year said, why don't we have a thank you card table stop that we can kind of always keep up on our thank you cards, and that's not one more thing to do while we're at these conferences? And I said, I think I know a way to fix that. And if you haven't stopped by yet, right outside the candidates table, I've got hundreds of blank thank you cards ready for you to pick up, fill out, deposit in the box, because those ideas matter. So get involved.
Thank you. Bobby?
Michael hit the nail right on the head. Listen, that's what we need to do more of. God gave us 2 ears, 1 mouth for a reason. My campaign, I've been surrounding my slogan, my whatever marketing, has been around what else? The reason for that question is that I run a podcast. And what I've learned over the 2.5, 3 years that we've been doing the podcast is usually when I'm interviewing my guest, quite simply the most powerful question is the very last one that I ask, and it's what else? What else should we be talking about? What else should I have asked you? What else is there to know? Because when I just ask the questions and don't ask that one, I'm assuming that I know everything that they're about to tell me. We need to listen more because there's a whole lot that I don't know that you all know. So I would want to listen to them.
All right, this is the last question. We'll start with Michael. There are many methods and forms of communication or exchanges of ideas. Realtors love to hall talk. Some will come to you directly and others won't. How would you tap into or find out about these issues being discussed in hall talk?
When I thought of that question, one of the first things that came to mind was, I have never heard a motion come to the board of directors from the hall. It's always been through a committee or an output group where the real leaders meet and things get discussed and things happen. And that's when I realized there's a lot of hall talk that goes on. I get that. I've been involved in, I'm guilty of some of that sometimes too, but I also learned very quickly that if I'm ready to get involved and make a decision and be one of those informed leaders, not a risk to a threat to our industry, an uninformed leader, I want to be an informed leader in the committee, in the output group. I want to be part of the real discussion, part of where the real motions happen. So all I can say is, get involved. We have plenty of room at the table. I'll go get a chair for you myself if we need more space. Please get on these committees and output groups. They're there to involve you and keep that buzzer going. You love it.
Michael's absolutely right. No motions have ever come about because of hall talk, but motions have died because of hall talk. There's been emergency meetings we've had to have because of hall talk. We have to be a part of hall talk. One of my favorite things that I love to do when I go sometimes to a conference is I just call it LobbyCon. Sit myself in the lobby and talk to the people that are coming through. That's usually where you get the greatest stories. That's where you know what's going on. That's where you get to connect with each other. But as a leadership team, we have to know what's going on in these halls. We have to be connected to what's going on in these halls, because small little bits of the phone line, as we talked about how like it gets different the more far we get away from it, that's what sometimes can kill our association. And we've got to be a part of that and run to it when we hear those conversations.
Thank you. So tomorrow, the board of directors will be voting. We've got 2 candidates, but we're only going to have 1 winner. So, oh. Oh, I'm so sorry. I don't have a check mark by your name. You did not have your closing statement. Did I give it to you?
I'm good.
All right. No. Where did I lose it at? All right, go for it.
Okay. Well, I'm going to follow the same precedent that all the national directors did and ask for your vote tomorrow. I sent out a handwritten note to many of you that were directors last year in the spring and said I would not ask for your vote until I earned it. I hope I have earned your support tomorrow. Just some highlights of my experience for those of you that are new in the room or that have never met me before. I was a 2-time president of the St. Joseph Regional Association of Realtors. Was president of KCRAR in 2020. At the state level, I co-founded our Missouri YPN. I have chaired Strat Planning. I have served multiple terms on the executive committee and the finance committee. At our national level, I have chaired YPN. I have chaired strategic thinking. I have served on the finance committee for NAR. I have served on the audit team. I have served multiple terms on the budget review team, and I have served on the executive committee for 2 years. I am confident that my experience has perfectly positioned me for a smooth transition onto the leadership team, especially as we go out and search and onboard our new CEO. I ask for your vote tomorrow.
Again, we've got a lot of adversaries out there trying to take us out, the realtor out, of the center of the transaction. And that concerns me. And it's concerned me so much that I can't sit down and have this conversation, and I can't let somebody be the lone candidate for a position that is so important. Because the decision you're about to make is not just for the leadership team. You're about to put someone on our strategic planning committee. You're about to put someone on finance and budget and in the executive committee. And that someone better be well versed in what our adversaries are doing and what our opportunities are for the future. about the building that we need to either build or stop renting or buy or whatever it may be. We have opportunities with the MREC, with the new director there. The one that was just left in his podcast with John Seabury back in July, he did everything but, John didn't he? He did everything but say, I sure wish Missouri Realtors would step up and help us with some property management issues we're having. About 80% of our time is spent on property management problems. And where's the Missouri Realtors who are supposed to lead by, excel in professional excellence? And yet we're letting our own MREC down a little bit? I'm ready to fix that. I just talked to property management this morning about that. We're ready to, we're putting a team together now to try and start providing that service to our MREC and to the public out there who are needing quality property managers. Please, my name is Michael Jakes. I'd love to have your vote tomorrow for Treasurer-elect for 2022. Thank you.
Now we're done. Thank you. Thank you all for being here. We really appreciate it. And now we're going to go into emerging issues, right? Okay.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the chairman for today's Emerging Issues Forum, Daryl Burns.
Good afternoon and welcome to all of you. I'm very privileged to be the 2022 Strategic Planning Chairman this year. Michelle Walker is my vice chair, if you'd please join me. When I first saw the script, it said, announced Daryl Burns, and it's announced by VOG, and I thought, I'm being announced by Voice of God. And when I was getting mic'd up, to my great chagrin, I found out, no, it's actually Voice of Gary. So anyway, what I would like to start with, and thank you to the leadership team for choosing us to do this. And because of strategic planning, that was one of the emerging issues came from that committee. So we appreciate the fact that strategic planning did that and we have this forum. We had our meeting a couple of days ago. We had the room all set up. We had the owls set up for the virtual attendees of our committee. We were standing around talking, and Janet walked in. And, she's normally full of bravado and everything, but she's, kind of whispering, talking in hushed tones. And John Mayfield says, well, Janet, are you okay? Do you have laryngitis? And she said, I want to make sure that Mark Zuckerberg doesn't overhear our conversation. So we kind of laughed. Siri laughed, Alexa laughed, and then the owls hooted and screeched. So the point is, this is the kind of stuff that we face all the time. I mean, how often have you been on talking to a friend and you get finished and an ad pops up on your phone for the very same thing that you were talking about? So our topic is cybersecurity, artificial intelligence, and privacy. And Michelle, if you'd start off with the first speaker.
Thank you so much, Daryl. So good to be here with all of you today. First up, we have Lauren Joseph. Lauren has decades of practical experience in governance, risk compliance, information systems, security, auditing, and privacy. He's an internationally recognized expert in enterprise GRC, which stands for Governance Risk Compliance. In his role as Chief Executive Officer of ESG.org, Lauren is responsible for researching and analyzing the risks and impacts associated environmental, social, and governance, representing the practitioners of this emerging community and committed to helping corporations deliver socially responsible, environmentally sound products and services to the world. Drawing from years of experience implementing GRC programs for large Fortune enterprises, Lauren delivers the expertise necessary to bridge the gap between organizational goals, technology, outcomes, and risk enablers in today's evolving threat landscape. Lauren, thank you for joining us. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Hopefully you can hear me clearly and I'm coming across great. Sorry that we were not able to make it into Missouri, as you know, the weather, and talk about threats and risks. The threat of COVID is real. I myself am recovering on the tail end. So when we think about threats and how they impact our business, there's so many different examples that we could use. But let's go straight to the slides. And I'm hoping to have an informative dialogue with you all. My colleagues, Shelby Rombaugh and Brian Cockrell, are both really well-seasoned individuals in this area as well. And we hope to entertain you a little bit, inform you a lot, but come away with having enough insight to think about your day-to-day business in the real estate industry and how these cybersecurity threats or impacts pertain to you in specific. So hopefully we're on the first page of the slide. We should be now where there are three topics: cybersecurity as a business issue, the threats and attacks continuing to rise, and what are the new emerging threats on the horizon? I'll spend the next couple of minutes talking about each of these three topics and informing you about what we see, not only in industry across financial services and healthcare and data, but also in not just large enterprises, but small mom and pop organizations are all being threatened by the same kind of actors. Cybersecurity is a business issue. We have this conversation, quite frankly, with every customer that we deal with. specific to the real estate industry, you've got to consider what's changed, right? Like there's more personal data available to you, the realtors. You're managing all of this sensitive data that was not regulated before, and it's regulated now with increased regulation on the horizon, some of which we'll reference in a minute. You have automated decision-making. So tools and technologies and fintech companies are taking your customers' data and making automated decisions on, to approve, to not approve, how much, how quickly. Those automated processes are fueled by data and decision-making and artificial intelligence and some of the capabilities that we'll discuss here today. We have more laws, as I mentioned earlier, on the horizon as they pertain to cybersecurity, the protection of personal information, the storage and handling and treatment of said information. It's important for you to understand that when we think about data, a mortgage has the most amount of sensitive data. If you can think about all of it, bank account and all that information, it's all relevant to today's bad guys. Today's bad guys want to be able to take that information and do a number of things with. But before we get to the bad guys, the final point on business, cybersecurity as a business issue is, as it was just mentioned, with Siri, and that was a great joke, but it's not a joke. I'm wearing an Apple Watch. So when you think about data and information, we don't think about the fact that there's a phone everywhere. I've got two sitting in front of me. There's a watch everywhere. You as a realtor bring your phones and probably your Apple Watches into the conversation when meeting with your clients, but also your clients bring their phones and watches. So it's not really a joke. These devices really are listening. It's how they're able to provide that actionable advertising. Sometimes it feels like right after the period comes out of your mouth. But then you have the real threat of, is it my device that's listening or is it my customer's device that's listening? Well, the answer is most definitively both. Both devices are listening, both devices are recording and transcribing, and both of them are using that information to be able to serve up ad content and whatnot. What's important to note about you capturing information like that is we think about in artificial intelligence in the back. We see all these wonderful movies where, the machines come to life, but really what happens is it parses our words, turns them into text, and uses them for all kinds of searching and filtering and serving us of content. All of this creates a greater landscape of threats to you, the individual agent, the company that's managing a group of agents, the title insurers, and all of the other participants in the life cycle. So with more data available, it would stand to reason that cyber attacks are on the rise. Now, when people hear the statistics behind cyber attack, you typically have a lot of folks in our industry, right? We're admittedly doing this, talking about the number in billions, right? And I want to bring this down to more practical and tactical terms. You've probably heard there's billions of hacks and there's billions of penetrations and it's occurring on an annual basis. Really, the number in the billions is about the attempts. More realistically, we've had in a recent interview by a CEO of a cybersecurity corporation, we had more realistic numbers. And the numbers are something along the lines of every 39 seconds, there's a real attempt with real impact and real, cash, whether acquired or absconded with. Every 39 seconds adds up to just about 2,000 real, measurable, quantitative impacts on a daily basis. Something like 800,000 on an annual basis when you do the math. The irony of those numbers is those are where you can actually have, attributable quantitative data that shows that someone lost data, someone paid a ransom, there's a whole host of threats. Those attacks are not only on the rise, but when you think about the volume and how it impacts you, you have to begin to wonder, wow, are these new laws going to cause me a problem? What if you have more than a license in Missouri? If you've got a license in neighboring states and they have specific data and privacy laws. You really have to now consider the value and the risk of the information that's necessary for you to do your job. You can't do away with that data, but instead you have to implement controls and preventative measures to ensure that you protect that data to the best amount possible. We think about threats as cyber in terms of, ransomware or a penetration attack or denial of service or some of those things. But what about some of the things that we've been seeing in the news lately? Environmental impacts, social impacts. In my role as the head of ESG.org, some of the stuff that we've been researching is a whole new host of laws and regulations that have to do with data, but have to do more with the data as it pertains to your environmental practices, your social practices, and how you govern your individual organizations. Remember, you could be a single person shop, you could be a shop of 100,000, the same controls are relevant, all dependent on the kind of information that you have available to you and what you're being asked to manage on a daily basis. We're going to have some real world examples towards the end of this presentation, but we really hope to enumerate in these first two talking points that it's everybody's business, right? From the secretary who answers the phone, right, to the managing broker in charge of the operation, and that threat is compounded by more actors and more ways to get into your environment. Now, when we think about that, we think about, well, what about our conversations? We're having these conversations with our clients, with all these devices around, is there confidentiality? This was one of the questions that was raised during our planning session. And the ironic answer to that is no, right? Confidentiality kind of went out of the window with the convenience of having an Apple Watch and a cell phone or multiple cell phones at your disposal. Why is that? Well, because whether it's Apple or Google or Microsoft or whoever your provider is, they've all enabled that technology with listening capabilities for the express purpose of providing you a better user experience, right? Those are the words that these organizations use. And quite frankly, it does provide a better user experience, but we forget the other side of that experience is every conversation, every word, every period that's uttered in the presence of these devices is being captured. Most recently, we've seen even in the last year or so where folks like Amazon for Alexa, right? You think of the little pods that you have in your kitchen that reads you the news in the morning. That data was subpoenaed, and with that subpoena was allowed in both a homicide case and fraud cases where it kept a certain amount of the recordings, it stored it on the servers, and all of a sudden words that you didn't even realize were being recorded were stored and housed by your wonderful service provider. So as you think of your personal obligation or commitment to data privacy and protection, it's important to recognize before we get to what's this great emerging threatscape look like, you have that responsibility as an individual to protect your own personal data, right? As individual agents and those carrying your certification, your customer data, and then the data of the organizations who you represent and support. All of that sounds like it's a lot of work, and it's not meant to scare in any way, shape, or form. As a matter of fact, what we've seen is that new data has allowed you to make better decisions faster and to provide more mortgages and more stuff to individuals using that technology. At the same time, as we look on the event horizon, the threats don't stop. They're coming up, new ones every day. So emerging threats now represents the thing that you don't know about until it pops up on your front door. You might read it in an article. You may be fortunate enough to have individuals as seasoned as the ones on this call to present it to you during your strategic planning sessions. And what it's intended to do is to open your mind towards the fact that you're housing data and how that data is impacting your operations in both a good and a bad way. The good way is you're making decisions, your customers are getting homes, they're happy, it's the American dream. The bad way is that there are a lot of nefarious actors now looking at that data as ways to be able to abscond with personal individual wealth, and you're one of the gatekeepers in protecting that information. Let's talk about a couple of examples that have hit the wire. You've seen a lot of news about ransomware. And one of my colleagues is going to go into great detail on the topic of ransomware. But when you think about things like environmental and social impacts, you think about ransomware and spear phishing. These are all really cute names for individual attack types that are relevant to each and every one of you all inside of this presentation. Not only are you subject to the threats that are abound, but you're ultimately responsible, if you're the custodian of that data, for the protection of that information, what controls you have in place, and the measures that you take, which we call in the industry due care, right? What is the due care that you're taking individually and collectively to protect the information that you're presented with? You're kind of like the lawyers or the doctors who have all of this sensitive information in order to make this really big decision. And before it was innocuous data, but now every bad guy is thinking about how to take that data and use it for their own selfish gain and economic gain. So as we wrap up this slide, I want to talk a little bit about how those emerging threats impact you. You can review the news and stay abreast, right? No one's asking you to become a cybersecurity professional, but be mindful when you read the news, you're reading it to understand how it could potentially affect your industry. Don't be afraid to ask questions. If you have a question, you can always reach out to colleagues like Brian or Shelby and myself, because sometimes it's really just understanding how this stuff impacts you and your business individually, right? It could not be real estate. You could be running a grocery store. You could be, a banker. It's all the same threats across the board. Additionally, as you're going about your daily business and acquiring new types of sensitive and personally identifiable data, ask yourself, what am I doing with that information and how am I managing that information in a meaningful way? That enables you to very proactively implement controls. We're not asking you to spend millions and billions of dollars in software. Well, we've got a bit of an echo, sorry. We're not asking you to spend a ton in software, but we are asking you to be mindful of the impact on business, how that threat continues to rise, and that there are new threats on the event horizon every day. You don't have to know them all, but the biggest ones will hit the news. Now I'd like to turn to my colleague, Brian Cockrell. Brian?
Okay, thank you, Lauren. That was a good way to kick this off. Our next speaker has spent 19 years as a senior special agent with the St. Louis field office of the Secret Service. He manages the Gateway Cyber Fraud Task Force, or CFTF. CFTFs are a focal point of Secret Service cyber investigative efforts developed to increase the resources, skills, and vision by which state, local, and federal law enforcement agencies, paired with prosecutors, private industry, and academia, to optimize a unified effort in containing cyber crimes and enhancing cyber attack responses. I asked Senior Special Agent Brian Cockrell, I said, okay, so that's what you do, but what is your background? What are your credentials? He provided me with a short resume, which I'm happy to show you. It's real short. He said, it's a secret. Brian, please take the floor.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate it, and thanks for the opportunity to be a part of the event today. So today, for my segment of our presentation, as Lauren alluded to a little bit earlier, I'll take a little bit of a deeper dive specifically on one type of cybercrime activity that is especially pertinent these days, and that's ransomware. And I would suspect that after May 6th of 2021, when the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack occurred that most people are at least somewhat familiar with ransomware to some extent, because that event certainly made a splash in the news and kind of brought it to the forefront of everyone's attention for a period of time at least. But to get everybody on the same page, essentially ransomware is a type of malicious software that denies access to systems or data and requires victims to pay essentially a ransom in order to regain full access to that information. It's typically spread through phishing emails, remote desktop compromise, or other software vulnerabilities. This type of malware, again, attempts to extort money from the victim by displaying an on-screen alert, essentially that ransom note, which is likely some type of just text file that would appear. The ransom note then will state that a computer or your network has been infected and locked, and you're locked out of your network or your data, and that files have been encrypted, and demands then a payment of ransom in cryptocurrency to restore your access. Ransomware is different from many other cyber attacks or network intrusions in that with ransomware, your organization is immediately paralyzed. In many other network intrusions, it's somewhat transparent and not necessarily interrupting an organization's operations. It can kind of be running in the background, exfiltrating data or what have you. But with ransomware, while most likely it's been sitting on a network for a period of time, once it is actually executed, an organization or an individual is kind of dead in the water at that point. It's also a little different because it can be successful with no reliance specifically on having to monetize stolen data. That element is beginning to change, and I'll touch a little bit more on that here in a moment. Like I mentioned, phishing emails are often the means of delivering this malware. And oftentimes they are specifically targeted to, if they're not specifically targeted at a person, be it an executive in a company or a specific individual or department of a company, they might be targeted to a topic that is in the news or is popular with people throughout the country. So for instance, right now, that or the last couple of years, those would be topics surrounding COVID. Certainly there have been a number of attacks that relate to phishing emails, with COVID being the topic of the email, and people click on a link and execute a malicious file. In 2020, a couple of years ago, types of these phishing emails might have revolved around the presidential election and topics related to the election. So, you know, the cyber criminals are utilizing things that people are curious about or interested in, and that will convince them to click on a link or to open an attachment that essentially is executing this sort of malware. The malware itself is the fastest growing, or ransomware is the fastest growing malware threat that we're seeing. And it not only risks personal financial security of individuals or businesses, but it also really threatens national security and potentially human life. You know, in the past couple of years, thousands of not only businesses, but hospitals, school districts, city governments, and other critical infrastructure have been paralyzed by ransomware. You know, when we're talking about healthcare facilities, in 2020 specifically, there were 560 healthcare facilities that were hit with ransomware attacks, and those are the ones that again are just what's reported. So at minimum, 560 healthcare facilities that year, and so that results in delays in patient treatment or the cancellation of surgeries, and really could lead to the loss of life. Quite honestly, when we're talking about municipal governments being attacked, you know. Two major cities, Atlanta and Baltimore, were in the news. They suffered kind of high-profile attacks over the past couple of years, and that results in potentially the emergency services being down, law enforcement networks being down, and additionally, it then results in public funds, you know, taxpayers' money being used to recuperate from the attack and potentially pay the ransom if the municipality decides to do that. So that's another element where we're seeing, now that, it's essentially the citizens' money that's going towards the remediation and the payment of the ransom in these scenarios. As a result of that, there are actually 4 states right now who are considering bills prohibiting state and local governments from making ransom payments. So they're not going to be using, so they wouldn't be using public money for this. And then additionally schools, to touch on that as well, with all of the online work that school districts have had to pivot to from time to time over the past couple of years. If we're talking about a ransomware attack on a school district, we're looking at the potential for school children to be unable to attend school when if they're in an online posture for a period of time. So these types of attacks really have far-reaching effects and go well beyond just the financial aspect to them. I mentioned earlier, speaking of that financial aspect, the way the criminals are making money. Certainly, there's the request for a ransom to receive decryption tools to gain access to your data. Additionally, what we're seeing now is what's called a double extortion trend. And that essentially means that, the first level of extortion is the ransom that you're required to pay to gain access back into your network or to your data. And then additionally, they are, especially if there's PII, personal information, or other or financial information that's been compromised by the cyber criminal, they are then threatening to publish that information or subsequently sell off that information on forums that are held on the dark web, where this type of compromised personal information, personal identity information is bought and sold. So that's the second level that the criminals are moving to. They're gonna extort you for the ransom just to gain access to your network, and then they're also going to extort you or just go ahead and sell off the data that they've compromised as well, or publish it somewhere, or somehow make further proceeds off of it. These days, 2/3 of ransomware attacks are what's known as, the cyber criminals are utilizing a model of what's known as ransomware as a service. So in that scenario, there is a developer and an affiliate relationship. So you have the developers, who are the technical gurus, who are actually the ones writing the malicious code. They're the ones that are the technical experts in putting together the malware, and then they license it for a fee or a share of the ransom. They enter into an agreement with what's known as the affiliate groups, who then execute the attack, the malware attack, the ransomware attack. And they don't have to be that technical. They're just they are finding ways to execute the attack and then paying a portion of their proceeds back to the software developers. Make no mistake, that these are full-scale. This is a full-scale underground industry. I mean, it's obviously 100% for criminal gain, but it mirrors a legitimate organization, a legitimate business. I mean, these groups have research and development departments, sales departments, customer service departments, public relations. I mean, it sounds crazy, but it's true. I mean, if you're a victim of a ransomware attack and they provide you with a way to contact someone to go over how to regain access to your network or how to make payment, I mean, you're essentially dealing with their customer service department. I mean, it sounds crazy, but that's really how they operate. It is a full-scale operation from top to bottom. The big question certainly that we get is whether or not law enforcement advises to pay in these scenarios, to pay the ransom to the cyber criminals. The easy answer is no. We don't encourage payment of the ransom. At the same time, we certainly understand when a business is faced with the inability to function, and that a business's leaders, executives will evaluate all options to protect their shareholders and their employees and their customers. From a law enforcement perspective, though, the paying of the ransom has a number of ripple effects, really. For one, your organization is kind of then a mark, right? You're now being known as an entity that is willing to pay, so there's a very good chance you might get hit again. I think the number is 80% of victims who have paid are hit subsequently another time, because again, they've been marked as somebody who will cooperate and will pay the ransom. The other part of it is, you're dealing with criminals, right? So if you are, willing to make a payment in the hopes of gaining access to your data, you're still taking a chance, and you're dealing with criminals. So there's not a whole lot of trust that really could be established there. So you have to take that into consideration. And then the other part of that is, it's very likely that the ransom payments are really going on to fund additional criminal activity. I mean, we can trace, these types of ransomware payments to groups that are also involved in terrorism or human trafficking or the sales of weapons, you name it. Many other varieties of sometimes, violent crime or their activities. And so by making a ransomware payment, you're essentially potentially very likely funding additional criminal activity to take place. So that's another area of concern here. To give everybody a few additional statistics, not to bore people with numbers, but just to kind of open your eyes even further. 27% of malware infections of network intrusion events in 2021 were malware. So more than a quarter of all malware infections were ransomware attacks. And ransomware attacks are up 350% since 2018. So within 3 to 4 years, 350% increase. Such is the case that it's estimated that they occur every 11 seconds, which is, again, just a startling number. The other part that really it makes it even more difficult is that the average downtime for an organization to recover from a ransomware attack is 22 days. And the average cost to recover is $1.85 million. Now, that's not just a ransom payment potentially, but that's just what it may take for an organization to remediate the issues they've had and get back up on their feet. The average ransom payment in 2021 was $570,000, which is a major increase over the past couple of years. In fact, it's an over 80% increase in just 1 year when it was in the $350,000 range. And then another unfortunate statistic is that the United States is hit with 50% of all ransomware attacks because, again, fortunately, the United States is a wealthy nation with a strong economy. So that's why the United States is targeted. When it comes to ransomware mitigation strategies, many of the mitigations for ransomware are the same general cyber hygiene recommendations to mitigate most malware attacks. There's no one tool that will stop specifically a ransomware attack. So, we're talking about installing updates and patching operating systems and software and firmware as those updates are released, restricting user permissions for installing and running software, scanning incoming and outgoing emails to detect and filter threats, disabling unused remote desktop ports and monitoring that remote desktop activity and logs, and more. And specifically when it comes to ransomware, it all revolves around having backups. So having it's the critical need for data to be backed up and stored offline and tested regularly, but specifically stored offline so that an attack doesn't have the ability to subsequently attempt to find and encrypt and the backups as well. So backups are a huge part, specifically when it comes to ransomware mitigations, having that ability to restore from backups so you're not reliant upon trying to purchase decryption tools to gain access to your data. The other part, which again applies to all malware, but really ransomware again because of the vector of the phishing email of how this is deployed, is that having the implementation of a cybersecurity awareness and training program for end users is really key. Getting the point across to individuals to be cyber aware and to not to take that extra moment to confirm that an attachment or a link that's in an email that they've received is in fact legitimate, to double check and maybe make a phone call to verify that something they're receiving that may look a little odd is in fact legitimate. That end user awareness is such a major key. You know, we unfortunately, the victims in most cybercrime activities have to some extent played an active role in the criminal activity because they've had to click on something or open something or send something that is subsequently executing the malware. So unfortunately, you know, we can be part of the problem in these types of cases. I'll push it back over to Shelby for some additional cyber related topics, and we will go over to you, Shelby.
Okay, so have you ever had that perfect client? You know, every story you tell them, they laugh. They're hanging on every word. Well, I had that experience happen with our next speaker and her husband. I was showing them houses. They were in the back seat of my car. We looked at several houses. And, you know, we all hate silence, so, my God, we're realtors, we talk, right? So I'm filled with extraneous things, extraneous facts. And I would say, you know, Augusta, Missouri is the first wine appellation in the entire country. And I would look in the rearview mirror and I'd see her husband nod, and then I would see her and she'd be looking down. And then, you know, another time I said, well, you know, we have the Lake of the Ozarks here in the state. It has the longest inland waterway, 1,150 miles. And I'd see Larry in the back nodding his head. And then I'd see her and she'd have her head buried. So one time they were in my office and I had some other obviously interesting tale to tell. And she's looking down. Well, then she gets up to go to the bathroom and he says, you know, what she's doing is she's Googling to make sure what you're saying is accurate. So Shelby Rounbout is an information technology and security professional with more than 25 years of experience in leadership roles within information security, risk management, technology project management, and networking. As a Deputy Chief Information Security Officer for U.S. Bank, she is responsible for governance, risk compliance, threat-informed defense, external cybersecurity partnerships, program management, security awareness and training, and the Business Information Security Officer team. It is my pleasure to welcome my friend, Shelby Rounbout.
Thanks, Daryl. And for everybody that knows Daryl, for me, those car rides were quite long. So I did appreciate his help in finding the perfect house, though. So, you know, you've heard a lot from Lauren and Brian about cyber attacks and ransomware in particular. And I'm sure you're all thinking, gosh, with the volume and sophistication of these attacks, this really could have a significant impact on my business. Hopefully that's what it's leaving you with. One thing I originally was going to ask if anybody questioned whether or not this could impact your industry, but I think Lauren and Brian covered it so well that you probably know the answer is yes. The criminals don't discriminate, and no industry is immune to privacy risk or cyber risk. And in fact, the real estate industry is quite appealing to attackers. Brian talked about some of the data elements that they look for, like financial data, social security number, driver's license, passport numbers, things of that nature. Those are things that are profitable for these bad actors. So additionally, most companies are trying to digitize, make their environments much easier for their customers to use. And in doing that, we see a lot of shift into cloud computing. So it's easier for the clients. You can get to this stuff, anytime, day or night, pretty much anywhere, but it also makes it more accessible to the hackers. Additionally, real estate companies typically work with numerous vendors and other third parties. So when you think about how a cyber attack rolls out, and when Brian provided examples of ransomware, you not only need to worry about how that's impacting or could impact your business, but how it's also potentially could impact your business if one of your other third parties was hit with ransomware. In the industry, we call it lateral movement, but the bad guys are looking for opportunities not just to necessarily get into your network, but they could come from your third party through some lateral movement. So it's an important thing to consider. How secure are you, but how secure are your other partners or vendors or other third parties that you're dealing with? I had a question coming into this conference asking, is the sharing of confidential information subject to identity theft or loss of a personal, I guess, a client's information? And thinking back to like a third party connection, if you push data out to a third party and it's any of that very valuable data that we call personally identifiable information, like social security number or financial data, it has to be properly handled. So you need to make sure that that information is getting to that next leg in a secure way through some form of encryption, perhaps, that needs to be protected during transit, which would be you moving the data to the vendor, or when that vendor or third party receives the data. If things are not protected in all of these ways, it could result in compromise. And there's other companies who've had, HVAC vendors that basically created a hole that a bad guy could get into and cause some significant damage in the retail industry. So regardless of the size of your business, it's really a good idea to start thinking about what are the risks and vulnerabilities and how are they impacting this particular industry. As you think through that, having a plan on how you're going to react and how you're going to manage through it is important. Brian touched on the hygiene components that are extremely important, and different things that you can do from a training and awareness perspective with your employees. But you also need to have a plan to identify an identification and a mitigation plan for risk. And then two key things, you also need to know how you're going to respond to an incident. And that's really important. So for instance, if you have cyber insurance, one of the first calls you may make is to your cyber insurance company. They have a lot of people that will come in and start helping you understand how you want to respond. You may have companies like marketing companies that might help you craft your messaging, but you have to know in advance how you're going to respond to these incidents and then how you're going to recover. Brian also mentioned that, in a ransomware situation, a lot of times the bad guys, they come after a ransom. A law enforcement well, in the industry, we don't want people to pay, and law enforcement recommends that you not pay. But in order to ensure that you don't have to pay, you need to have a recovery plan. How are you going to recover? Do you have your backups in place? And have you tested that to see if you can recover? One of the things that I think is helpful for a lot of companies, and it's a lot of information, but the National Institute of Standards and Technology has a lot of resources that can be helpful in building out plans for your environment. These frameworks give really good guidance and they're free. So I think that's a really good place to look. So Brian also mentioned the Colonial Pipeline. And unfortunately, I think that was the first real cyber event that taught businesses that cyber really is an operational risk and a business risk. And the reason I say that is because it's the first time that pipeline in its 57-year history had to shut down the entire pipeline. So they had to shut down their entire business for 5 days, which caused a lot of havoc on the East Coast with a 5-day outage for fuel. So it was pretty significant, and it can happen pretty much to anybody. So imagine for a minute if you had a successful ransom attack that impacted your business. And imagine that the data, all of your data, was completely inaccessible to you or anyone else in your business. Do you have a recovery plan? Do you know what you would do or how you would handle it? Or would you have to resort to paying the ransom? Those are all things that you need to consider going in. So once a threat actor is in your environment, they're not going to keep things to themselves. They're going to do exactly what Brian said. They're going to send you a ransom demand to get your data back. And they're also probably going to sell your customers' information on the dark web. It's all part of that enterprise that Brian spoke of. So when you think about hackers, I mean, I know that Brian said it's big enterprise, but they're always looking for low-hanging fruit. I think they're a bit lazy in the way that they go about this, and they target the weakest link in an organization. Brian mentioned that email was one of the favorite attack methods. So he talked about phishing, and if you're not familiar with phishing, it's basically an email scam where, you know, somebody sends you an email that says, oh, you just won $1 million, click on this link and we'll pay you. I mean, they're more sophisticated than that these days, but those are the types of emails that allow these hackers to get into your system and drop a payload in your environment that can be exploited. So people are really the biggest risk, and we really need to ensure that our employees and people in our offices really understand, how do you look at an email? I mean, first and foremost, if the email sounds too good to be true, it's definitely too good to be true. But really hover over the link and make sure it's going to somewhere legitimate. Don't click it out of the email. There's a number of things that you can learn about email hygiene and how to validate whether something's real or not real. I mean, the main thing is don't click on the link. So with that, I'm going to leave you with some of the key impacts to a business. So from a corporate perspective, I mean, security individuals look at like 3 things that are taken into consideration as we're trying to protect our customer information and our networks. It's confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Confidentiality would be if you lose customer data, if somebody comes in and they take your customer data, that's a confidentiality breach. That and integrity could result in a privacy event. And with regulatory changes on the rise for this industry, I think that's a lot of information that you probably need to go back and look at as part of your planning. Privacy is definitely a big deal. The other things that I would suggest you look at are the regulatory implications. I don't know what the fines and things look like in this particular industry. In financial services, they're pretty steep. And we have a lot of regulation. But then also reputation. I mean, once you have been attacked, your name is in the news, people know what happened. It's hard to keep that under wraps. So just be mindful of all of these things that could potentially impact you during either a cyber attack or a ransomware attack. So with that, I'll shift over to another slide where Lauren, Brian, and I are all 3 going to talk a little bit about fraud in this industry. I'll kick it off with just a story from my past. My mom, in 2006, we were moving my mother to live with us. She was in early stages of dementia. And I had schooled her on, you know, the bank is never going to call you and ask you for your checking account information or credit card number, any of those things. Don't talk, you know, don't tell anybody that information over the phone. So we were selling our house, and the wire transfer was coming in on a specific day. And she got a call from the bank, air quotes, the bank, asking for her checking number and routing information, which she gave to them. And while the dementia hadn't completely taken over, she didn't remember not to do it. But she remembered after she did it that it probably wasn't a good thing. So she called me at work. And I mean, luckily I worked for the bank, which had all of her accounts. So I was very quickly able to get all of her accounts put in a paused mode so that none of the transactions could take place, set up new accounts, and then they did the wire transfer. But I mean, that she was very lucky that she remembered quickly that she needed to do something about it. So Brian, I'll kick it over to you to talk a little bit about real estate and title fraud. I think you probably have some of the best stats on those things.
Yeah, yeah. The biggest thing that would relate to the real estate world that we see or deal with frequently would be that BEC, business email compromise type of fraud. So if you haven't heard that term before, that describes a fraud scheme targeting businesses working with other parties that perform, wire. Usually it's regarding a wire transfer payment. So, certainly with the closing of a real estate deal and when there is money exchanging hands related to that, this is an area where the cyber criminals will exploit that type of transaction. They basically find a way to insert themselves into the middle of that type of a transaction by either compromising a legitimate business or personal email account, or through computer intrusion techniques, and send a fraudulent email that basically redirects the funds to an account held and controlled by the cyber criminals. So we see, in a real estate transaction, certainly this could be the case where the cyber criminal may pose as a title company, or may pose as some other element where funds would be transferred to or from, and they say something as simple as we've changed at the last minute, we've had a change in account information, and please send payment to the following account with such and such bank, and with that, the victim is, they're aware that they're a part of some type of what they think to be a legitimate transaction because of the sale of property to some extent. So when they see this, it doesn't seem like anything out of the ordinary, and funds are wired and lost as a result of sending it to an account controlled by the criminal. The thing that oftentimes in these type of business email compromise cases, the thing that you can really look for are some pretty apparent red flags. You'll see that these types of emails often have an element of urgency to them. You'll notice that maybe language and grammar are kind of off. You'll notice that you might get multiple instruction emails. So the language and grammar aspect, these types of scams are originating overseas, and English may not be the primary language. So a lot of times the grammar, the syntax, the spelling, it may be a little bit off. It kind of seems legit, but but something seems a little strange. That's certainly a red flag. And that urgency of request element, oftentimes there's something to the effect of, this was to be done by the end of the day, and the person sending the request is unavailable or is out of town, so they're trying to convince you not to follow up and do that dual factor authentication by actually making a phone call or speaking with the sender and just verifying that this is a legitimate request to make this change. So that's another red flag that we often see, and that's something that people can look out for to avoid becoming a victim of these types of scams. While when I talked earlier about ransomware being such a large cybercrime element these days, there's actually more business email compromise type of fraud that is occurring than ransomware. It's just that the dollar amounts are a little bit lower. There's more of it. It's just at a lower dollar amount, so it maybe doesn't make the headlines that the big ransomware attacks garner. And another part of that is just because they're not hitting those critical infrastructures like the pipeline and things like that, so they don't make the big headlines. But it is absolutely the leading component of cybercrime these days are those business email compromise types of transactions, fraudulent transactions.
Thank you
Thanks,
so
Brian.
much.
That was awesome. I think that we are getting the hook. So I'm going to turn it back over to Daryl. Thank you all so much for having us. We really appreciate being here. And we did leave our contact information on the last page of the presentation if it's available. So thanks, Brian. Thanks, Lauren. And back to you, Daryl.
Thank you all so much. Such interesting information. I hope you're all getting so much out of this. I know I am. Our final speaker today is Chris DeRosa. Chris is NAR's Member Information and E-commerce Product Leader. She works in the Chicago office, and some of us have had the pleasure of working with her in the past. Chris is joining us virtually today to talk about best practices in the cybersecurity area that are specific to us, the realtors. Welcome, Chris.
Thank you very much. So I'll just be very respectful of your time. There's a few things, though, that I definitely want to cover, both from best practices for our realtors as well as resources we have at NAR for you, and also what's going on, if anything, on the federal front in terms of data security. So next slide, please. When I do these cybersecurity awareness programs for our realtors and for our associations, I always mention certain best practices. When I do this for NAR staff, we call them the rules. So I just want to touch on a couple of them because there are a couple that do affect actually some of the state laws that are in place right now and what might be coming someday from the federal. And one of them is data retention and destruction. And this means that every business, every one of our brokerages, you really need to take stock of all your business documents, both on paper and electronic, and you need to inventory and determine how long you need to keep them. If they're financial records, check with your accountant. The IRS has regulations on number of years to keep payables, number of years to keep receivables. Make sure you have that retention policy. And you need to do more than just frame it and hang it on the wall. When it's time, you have to destroy those documents. And a breach is embarrassing enough, but when a breach occurs and there's a lot more data exposed than really needed to be, it's even more embarrassing, but then you become liable for even more people whose data has been exposed. So make sure you do that. I also want to touch very quickly on smart password management because I think everyone has heard this one, right? Long, complicated letters, numbers, special characters do not have the same password at every place. And if you think about it, in fact, Verizon's cybersecurity report this past year stated that what do 60% of these breaches are all about? Getting your credentials. I can think of a Mission Impossible type movie where someone's rappelling down the side of a high rise. They have a glass cutter, they have signal jammers, they're doing all this work to get in. And I walk up to the front, turn over the fake rock, pick up the key and walk in the house. See, a lot less work and I'll get the same gain. So be very, very protective of that. And finally, I want to touch here on software up to date. Brian mentioned that. And I say, don't forget the smart devices. You look at your smartphone and you see all those apps and you see all those updates that are waiting and you think, half of them are games, who cares? Most of those updates are security based. Ask Poor Words with Friends about their big breach several years ago that came through and users not updating the software on their smartphone. So all your apps, make sure you keep them up to date. Next slide, please. So one of the things I wanted to talk about from NAR's point of view has to do with the different privacy protection regulations out there. And the question is always asked, what's the federal government doing? And our answer is not much. They are very busy with a lot of other things right now. So right now, all of these different breach notification laws, data protection are state by state by state. There's a few federal ones like HIPAA, but the ones that would concern our realtors are by state. And it's not the state where you are. It's the state where your clients, customers, and agents are residents of. At the National Association, we have members in every state. We have to know every one of those state laws. So please make sure you know what data you have. I mentioned inventory that data, where that data is from, and when there's a breach, working with your insurance company or your attorneys, what state breach notification laws you need to be aware of. And the less you give out, the better. Please know in almost every state, home address is personally identifiable information, as is home phone, as is cell phone, email address. You'd think, well, how could that be? But when people use it as a username, a lot of states consider that PII. So with that data, just be very careful with that. Next slide, please. There has been things going on. I'm sure you've all heard of GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations. Those affect people who are legal residents of the European Union and a few other European countries. So if you are working with clients who are legally a resident of France, then you are subject to the GDPR regulations. The state of California is the first US state to come up with a law almost as tough as GDPR. It went into effect last year, again, affecting residents of the state of California. Virginia followed suit. Theirs kicks in 2023. Colorado also did so as well, and a bunch of other states are looking at it. So for right now, it looks like a mishmash because it's state by state by state. But I just want our realtors to understand it's affecting the state of residence of your clients, agents, customers, not just by where you are located. Next slide, please. So, and I went right to our advocacy folks to get this information from them when I said, hey guys, anything going on the lobbying level at legislator or regulatory agencies? And their answer was no. Not much legislatively because Congress is very busy with other things right now. And so a lot of this has gone on the back burner. Not much at the Federal Trade Commission either, the FTC. They've been coming up with some rules about artificial intelligence, rules about lax security practices, but right now the commissioners just can't seem to agree on it. Now, one of the things is, and I provided a handout to Cara, she's going to have it on your conference website. It was a handout we gave to NAR's Federal Technology Committee at our November convention. And it was the state of every single bill pending in both the House and the Senate. And again, they're just not going anywhere right now. So folks who are interested in that, really two stumbling blocks. One stumbling block comes from some states, preemption of state law. They look at what's been proposed at the federal level saying, hey, our state laws are even tougher and better. I don't want that federal one. And other states are saying, wow, that's too tough. We like the law we have. We don't want that one to preempt ours. And the other big sticking point of all these bills floating around Congress has to do with what's called a private right of action. California's law has that. Private citizen can start, suing. They can start enforcing their own rights. They don't need a federal or state government to do that. And that's been the other sticking point. So if you're wondering, gosh, NAR, aren't you guys doing anything with this? NAR certainly is, but it's just not moving anywhere. Next slide, please. So one of the things I always point out to our realtors is, and I even heard Daryl say, realtors are very talkative people. They're very social, right? You have your Facebook and your LinkedIn and your Twitter and your Instagram. Just be careful, right? Because of course, your logos are out there, your brands are out there, your photo is out there, maybe some of your listings or client lists. Mary Beth says Joe Realtor is the best realtor I ever worked with. And that's what makes these phishing campaigns successful. And that's why the number one cybercrime that hits our realtors is wire fraud. Because when that nervous first-time home buyer gets an email with your logo and your picture and talking about some things that you all had talked about, saying, oh, except I have different wire instructions for you, you can see why somebody who's really good at crafting these spear phishing campaigns can get that buyer to send money where it shouldn't go. Next slide, please. So a lot of people will ask me, hey, Chris, what's the best antivirus I should buy? What's the best anti-malware? And besides my saying the one that's not free, a lot of times I say, you know what your best tool is? Common sense, right? We're humans. We want to help, we trust, and we want to deliver service quickly. That's just a go-to. We can't change that. But what we can do is just remember cybersecurity awareness. Make it a habit. Stop, wait, ask yourself. No, as was mentioned by Shelby, banks will never send you an email saying, click here and put in your, banking password for us to double check. Is it a client you've been working with? Does this make any sense? Spend that minute up front to think about it. Then you won't have to spend hours, days, months on the back end cleaning up a mess. Next slide, please. And finally, the resources at NAR. We have some great ones for you on nar.realtor. We have our cybersecurity checklist, really great tool that just puts it out there step by step by step, how to keep things safe. We also have a great data privacy and security toolkit. We published this about 3 years ago, but there will be a new one coming out this year. So just keep checking that spot on nar.realtor. We've got our advocacy group, our legal group, me and our IT group all working together to put together a great updated toolkit. And then finally, as Shelby mentioned, cybersecurity insurance. One of NAR's benefits, partners, what we used to call our affinity partners, who have services for our members, is a cybersecurity insurance company. So again, I encourage you to go out there and take a look and see what we have available for you that we put together based on all the experience we've had ourselves and also what we've heard from our members over the years with their cybersecurity issues and comments and questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Chris. I hope everyone got something out of this. I know we've run over on time. I appreciate your patience. Have a great evening tonight. Thank you.